Francis Bacon and Descartes. Scientific revolution. In the 1600s, Europe entered an age of transformation, the scientific revolution. Two philosophers, Francis Bacon and René Descartes, reshaped how we search for truth. Francis Bacon, an English thinker, is often called the father of empiricism. He believed knowledge should come not from tradition or abstract speculation, but from careful observation and experiment. Bacon promoted what we now call the scientific method: gather data, test ideas, and build knowledge step by step. For him, science was a tool to improve human life, giving us power over nature through discovery. René Descartes, a French philosopher, took a different path. He turned inward, asking what we can know with certainty. In his famous Meditations, Descartes doubted everything, even his senses, until he reached one foundation that could not be doubted. I think, therefore I am. From this starting point, he built a system of knowledge based on reason, clarity, and logic. Descartes also saw the world as a machine, governed by mathematical laws, an idea that deeply influenced modern science. Together, Bacon and Descartes shaped the foundations of modern thought. Bacon gave us the method of discovery through experience. Descartes gave us the method of certainty through reason. One emphasized the power of the senses, the other the power of the mind. But both set philosophy and science on a new course that still defines our search for knowledge today. Hobbes and Locke. Political philosophy. In the 17th century, Europe entered the scientific revolution, a turning point in how humans searched for truth. Two thinkers led the way, Francis Bacon and René Descartes. Francis Bacon, an English philosopher, argued that knowledge must come from observation and experiment. He promoted induction, building truths from evidence, and helped shape what we now call the scientific method. For Bacon, science was practical. It should improve human life by uncovering nature's laws. René Descartes, a French philosopher, took a different path. He turned to reason, doubting everything until he found one certainty. I think, therefore I am. From this foundation, he built a vision of the world as a machine governed by mathematics, where reason was the key to certainty. Bacon trusted the senses. Descartes trusted the mind. One gave us experimentation, the other rational clarity. Together, they launched modern philosophy and science, setting humanity on a new course in the pursuit of knowledge. Hume, Kant, and Enlightenment. The Enlightenment of the 18th century was an age of reason, progress, and debate. Two of its most powerful voices were David Hume and Immanuel Kant. David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, was a radical skeptic. He argued that human knowledge is built on experience, but experience can never guarantee certainty. For example, we believe the sun will rise tomorrow because it always has, but we can't prove it will. Hume also questioned religion, miracles, and even the idea of a permanent self, showing how fragile our assumptions really are. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, said Hume had awakened him from his dogmatic slumber. Kant agreed that knowledge begins with experience, but he argued that the mind actively shapes that experience. We don't just receive the world, we organize it through concepts like space, time, and causality. For Kant, reason also gives us moral law, the categorical imperative, the command to act only in ways that could be universal for all. Together, Hume and Kant embody the Enlightenment spirit, fearless questioning on one side, and bold system-building on the other. Hume showed the limits of reason, while Kant sought to rebuild philosophy on stronger foundations. Their debate still defines modern thought. How much can we truly know, and what must we do with the freedom of reason? Hegel and German idealists. After Kant, philosophy in Germany entered a new and ambitious phase, German idealism. Thinkers like Fichte, Schelling, and above all, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel tried to answer the questions Kant had left behind. For Kant, the human mind shaped experience, but we could never know reality in itself. The German idealists disagreed. They argued that reason could grasp the absolute, that reality and thought were deeply connected. Hegel took this to its peak. He saw history, art, religion, and philosophy as part of a grand unfolding of spirit, the process by which human freedom becomes more fully realized. For Hegel, truth was not a static thing, but a dynamic journey. He described this movement as dialectic, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Contradictions, instead of being dead ends, became the engine of progress. Hegel's vision was sweeping. He saw history itself as rational, moving toward greater freedom and self-awareness. This idea would inspire revolutions, shape political theory, and influence almost every branch of modern philosophy. German idealism, with Hegel at its center, tried to unite reason, freedom, and history into one grand system. It was bold, difficult, and visionary, and it set the stage for both the critics and the rebels who came after. Marx and Mill, social/political thought. In the 19th century, philosophy turned toward society itself. Two of the most influential voices were Karl Marx and John Stuart Mill. Karl Marx saw history as a struggle between classes. For him, ideas were not floating in the air. They were shaped by material conditions, by who owned the means of production. Capitalism, he argued, created wealth, but also deep inequality. His solution was revolution, to abolish private ownership of industry and build a classless society. Marx believed philosophy should not just interpret the world, it should change it. John Stuart Mill, writing in Britain, took a different path. He defended liberal democracy, free expression, and individual liberty. Mill argued that society is healthier when people can think, speak, and live as they choose, so long as they do not harm others. He also championed women's rights, education, and social reforms to reduce poverty. Together, Marx and Mill embody two competing visions of modern politics. Marx emphasized collective struggle and economic justice. Mill emphasized individual rights and democratic freedom. Their debate between equality and liberty, revolution and reform, still shapes politics today. Next, Nietzsche, critique of morality and modernity. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the most radical voices of the 19th century. He declared that God is dead, not as a celebration, but as a diagnosis. In modern times, traditional religion and morality had lost their power, yet nothing strong had replaced them. Nietzsche warned that this vacuum would leave society adrift, vulnerable to nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning. His answer was not despair, but creativity. He called for the birth of the Übermensch, or overman, someone who creates new values instead of following old ones. Nietzsche also exposed the hidden motives behind morality. He argued that much of Western morality was a slave morality, designed to protect the weak by restraining the strong. For him, true vitality came from affirming life, embracing struggle, and saying yes to existence in all its chaos. Though often misunderstood, Nietzsche was not simply destructive. He was a thinker of transformation, challenging us to question inherited beliefs, confront the void, and create meaning ourselves. His critique of morality and modernity shook philosophy to its core, and it still inspires and unsettles us today. Dostoevsky and Freud, the psychological turn. In the late 19th and early 20th century, philosophy began to turn inward, to the depths of human psychology. Two of the most powerful figures in this shift were Fyodor Dostoevsky and Sigmund Freud. Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist, explored the darkest corners of the human soul. In novels like Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov, he showed how freedom can lead not just to greatness, but also to guilt, despair, and violence. For Dostoevsky, faith and morality were constantly tested by suffering and doubt. His stories raised profound questions about choice, evil, and redemption. Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, brought a new language to the study of the mind. He argued that much of our behavior is driven by unconscious desires and conflicts. Dreams, slips of the tongue, even symptoms, all revealed hidden struggles within. Freud also showed how culture and morality press down on individuals, shaping but also repressing them. Together, Dostoevsky and Freud opened philosophy to the inner life. They revealed that beneath reason lies a turbulent world of passion, fear, and desire, a world that shapes our choices as much as logic ever could. Wittgenstein and logical positivists. Analytic philosophy. In the early 20th century, philosophy took a sharp turn toward language, science, and logic. At the center of this shift stood Ludwig Wittgenstein and the movement known as logical positivism. Wittgenstein's early work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, argued that language mirrors reality. For him, meaningful statements were those that pictured facts in the world. Anything beyond that, like metaphysics, ethics, or religion, he called nonsensical. This radical view inspired a group of philosophers in Vienna who became known as the logical positivists. The positivists believed philosophy should follow the model of science. A statement, they said, is meaningful only if it can be verified through experience or is logically necessary. This made them fierce critics of traditional metaphysics, theology, and vague speculation. But Wittgenstein himself changed his mind. In his later work, Philosophical Investigations, he argued that meaning comes not from mirroring reality, but from how words are used in everyday life. Language was no longer a rigid picture of the world, but a flexible set of language games. Together, Wittgenstein and the logical positivists shaped analytic philosophy. They forced philosophy to become sharper, clearer, and more rigorous, even if it meant abandoning centuries of big abstract systems. Sartre, Camus, Beauvoir. Existentialism. In the mid-20th century, as the world faced war and uncertainty, existentialism became the philosophy of human freedom and responsibility. Two of its most famous voices were Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. Sartre declared that existence precedes essence. Unlike objects which have fixed purposes, human beings first exist and only later define themselves through choices. This freedom is absolute but also terrifying. We cannot escape responsibility by blaming fate, tradition, or God. Every choice defines who we are, and with that freedom comes the burden of creating meaning in a meaningless world. Camus, often linked to existentialism, spoke of the absurd. Life has no given purpose, yet we continue to search for meaning. Instead of despair, Camus urged us to embrace the absurd, to live fully, passionately, and without illusions. His image of Sisyphus, endlessly pushing a boulder uphill, captures this spirit. The struggle itself can be enough to fill a life. Together, Sartre and Camus made existentialism a philosophy of freedom, responsibility, and courage. They challenged us to face a world without guarantees and to live authentically in spite of it. Foucault and Derrida. Post-Structuralism. By the late 20th century, philosophy was shifting again, this time toward questioning power, knowledge, and meaning itself. Two key figures in this movement were Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida. Foucault examined how power shapes truth. He showed that what we call knowledge is never neutral. It is tied to systems of control, from prisons to schools to medicine. Instead of grand universal theories, Foucault studied history to uncover how ideas about madness, sexuality, and crime were constructed. For him, philosophy was about exposing these hidden structures of power. Derrida, meanwhile, turned philosophy onto language itself. He developed deconstruction, a method of reading that reveals the instability of texts. Every concept, he argued, carries contradictions and depends on what it excludes. Meaning is never fixed, it always slips and shifts. Together, Foucault and Derrida rejected rigid systems and absolute truths. They opened philosophy to voices at the margins and made it more critical, playful, and self-aware. Post-structuralism didn't give final answers, but it taught us to question the assumptions behind every answer we're offered.